if you were paying attention on Sunday, Jesus, without getting political, kind of gets a little political, but without getting political. Can you remember what this Sunday's gospel was, anybody? So the scribes and the Pharisees, as always, are trying to play like trip up Jesus. Caiaphas is like, I bet you $20 I can trip him up this time. Everyone's like, you're on. So they send some of the Herodians over to Jesus and they say, hey Jesus, is it lawful for us to pay the census tax? And here's a little bit of background. You have the Romans who are occupiers, right? And they tax the people. And it's kind of a little bit of a racket because the tax collectors are oftentimes Jews who are kind of in league with the Romans, and they'll collect whatever tax that they're prescribed to collect, and then they'll keep whatever extra for themselves. And so it was kind of a touchy subject, a way in which a lot of the Jews felt oppressed. Now, the reason this is a trap for Jesus, because if Jesus says, like, yeah, you should pay the taxes, then it sounds like, well, Jesus is a sellout to the Romans, right? And if Jesus says no, then they can turn around and be like, Jesus is in competition with Caesar. He's against the Romans. And they really want him to say something like kind of controversial. And I think that Jesus' answer here is a good way for us to understand a lot of what the church is going to have to say about the tough topics of today. Because they think he's either going to say this or he's going to say this, and either way we've got him. But Jesus, and if you were paying attention, if you missed this, like, Jesus is a master of this stuff. And Jesus is kind, but sometimes Jesus isn't particularly nice. So the Herodians asking this question, they actually put it like kind of politely. They're like, teacher, we know that you teach the truth from God. And so we're going to ask you this question. And he sees their hearts and he says, you hypocrites, which isn't very nice. But he's kind of calling them out. He says, let me see one of those coins. And so they hand him a coin. Guess whose image is on the coin? First century, Roman Empire, who's going to be on the coin? Caesar, right? So Caesar's image is on the coin. He says, you know what? Whose image is on this? And they're like, Caesar. He says, well, go ahead and give to Caesar what's Caesar's. But give to God what's God's. Now, let me ask you a question. Whose image is on you? My 10-year-old got this when I asked him. Y'all know. Whose image is on you? The coin has got Caesar's image. Now, if you look in a mirror, whose image do you see? You see yourself, but whose image are you made in? God's, right? So Jesus, and the ones who are asking the question, they might have understood this because in Genesis it tells us we're made in the image and likeness of God. So Jesus is saying, you can give Caesar back his coins, but yourself, you belong to God. Give to God what's God's. So the image of Caesar is on the coin, so give that back to Caesar, fine. But yourself, your heart, that belongs to God. So Jesus ends up answering the question without really going to either or. Like, he's not like in whatever, like, the ways that they're thinking about it. He just creates this whole other third thing. And I think a lot of the issues of our day, if we pay attention to the church's social teaching, we're provided really with I think, in a sense, like a third option, an option that is not a political option so much as it is good old-fashioned Christianity 101. So the social teaching of the church goes way back to the gospel itself, but we could trace a lot of the explicit teachings back to Pope Leo XIII. When the world started to become more centralized in the Industrial Revolution, there was an encyclical that had a lot to say about things like us being made in the image and likeness of God, about the dignity of work, about all kinds of the issues that are still very much hot button issues today. And the church has something to say about that. Not something political, but something very human to say about it. And among those issues that the church teaches about, of course, is the issue of race. And the church's teaching here is really quite simple. It's that every single human being, created in the image and likeness of God, has inherent, inalienable, and inviolable dignity. No matter where they're born, no matter how much money they make, no matter what their skin color is, that all of us are made in the image and likeness of God. And we go all the way back to the first century and we get this really strong sense that who belongs in the church? Who did God die for? Who did Christ die for? Everybody, right? And so the church is supposed to be a home for everyone. And as a matter of fact, the word Catholic means universal. And if we go back to like the dawn of the church, we find that the apostles from the early ages, they spread out all over the world because Jesus said, go therefore and preach the gospel to all nations. Hey, Father, how you doing? Hey, good. Father and Mr. Dustin are modeling our confirmation mask. Sometimes it's a t-shirt, but it's 2020, so he's got the Jesus fish mask. So every nation, every people, and then the other thing, of course, is that we're all supposed to be one. One of the first books of the Bible that was actually written down was Paul's first letter to the Corinthians. And in Corinth, there were converts, and it wasn't so much an issue of race, it was an issue of money. So you had poor Christians and rich Christians in Corinth. And Paul, in 1 Corinthians, is actually really kind of going after that community, because what they would do is they would have a mass for the rich people first, and then they would have a mass for the poor people, and they would get the scraps. And Paul was like, right? And it's from this that Paul tells us in 1 Corinthians 12, he says, we are one body, even though we're many parts. And he reminds us how important unity is. And he goes a little earlier, he says some tougher things about what it means when we don't honor that, when we don't treat everyone as equal brothers and sisters in Christ. And it's there in 1 Corinthians 13 that he gives us that beautiful treatise that you've probably heard, even if you don't study a ton of Bible. It's hard to escape. 1 Corinthians 13, love is patient, it's kind, it's not jealous, it's not rude. He tells us about that right after he goes into telling us that we're all one. And so the church's social teaching, one simple thing I want to say about it is that it's about how we are all brothers and sisters in Christ. And how we need to treat each other that way. And of course, we need to work toward a world that where that's a reality. So this video that I wanted to show, they started filming it back, I think, in like 2016, 2017 with Dr. Ansel Augustine, who used to be here in the